In this episode of Fun with Guns, we're going to talk about the myths of the fast draw. Cowboys actually made up a relatively small part of the population, and they weren't the only people to carry guns. In fact, most cowboys carried holsters that covered everything except the grip of the gun. The entire idea of the holster was to keep it secure and protected while making it reasonably quickly accessible. It was not designed for the fast draw. One of the few television shows to give a relatively accurate look at how cowboys would have carried their guns was the 1960s series The High Chaparral. This show, to its credit, stayed away from the Hollywood staple of the low-slung quick-draw rig. Quite frankly, if you showed one of those rigs to a cowboy, he would not understand why on earth anyone would carry their gun that way. Many lawmen carried their guns in similar rigs, sometimes just carrying them in their belts. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that a holster did not come with the gun. You had to buy it separately, and it wasn't cheap. A lot of people simply tucked guns into their belts. And when gunfights did occur, it was often a couple of drunk guys just trying to drag their gun out from wherever they had it and shoot at each other until someone was down or they'd run out of bullets. Often after the first few shots, using the old black powder guns, the place was so smoky they couldn't even see their target. Statistically speaking, the Wild West was not nearly as wild as it's portrayed on television. Gunfights were not as commonplace as Hollywood makes out. In fact, because everyone was armed, a lot of people were actually more reticent to draw their gun. Thus the old phrase, an armed society is a polite society. That being said, plenty of gunfights did occur. And although most of them were confusing messes, there were actually a couple where people stood out and faced each other and actually drew their guns from holsters or from their belts. Probably the two most famous would be the Bill Hickok shootout and, of course, the infamous shootout at the OK Corral. Of course, neither one of these were so much a test of speed as they were accuracy. Modern fast draw holsters, especially those used in Hollywood, are usually metal-lined rigs that allow the gun to be cocked on the draw, something no one did in the Old West. It was a good way to shoot your foot off. The art of the fast draw actually became very popular with the Hollywood elite in the 1960s, and such people as Jerry Lewis, Sammy Davis Jr., Glenn Ford, James Arness, and Dean Martin all got into quick draw clubs. There seems to be some debate whether Jerry Lewis or Sammy Davis Jr. was the fastest, but one thing was sure, those two guys were lightning quick, and they each displayed the talent in at least one movie. However, they frequently made their skills part of their stage show. Most of this so-called gunfighter stuff that you hear about is an invention of dime novelists, newspapers trying to sell print media, and later on Hollywood. Most so-called gunfighters back in the days of the Old West were actually more along the lines of mercenaries. Now don't misunderstand me. There were plenty of people, criminals and lawmen alike, who got into frequent gun battles. I'm not saying gun fights didn't exist. I'm saying gun fights that were two men facing in front of each other doing a quick draw competition were more or less an invention of the media. That being said, the ability to draw your gun and engage it quickly was still important, especially for a lawman. But in the Old West, the gun most favored for self-defense was the shotgun. So the quick draw, it's neat, it's cool, and it's a modern creation. Well, this has been Capt.Max of Fun with Guns. I hope you enjoyed this little bit on the fact and fiction of the quick draw. And as always, please be safe.